I found my wife entwined with others at a nudist party during our anniversary cruise. Our 25 years of marriage were destroyed by her lust for strangers and partner swaps. The love and trust we built shattered in an instant. This is my raw journey through betrayal and heartbreak. Watch as I expose the reality. My name is John Hubble, and I recently divorced my wife after 25 years of marriage. Mary and I met when I walked into the manufacturing plant where she worked as a secretary. I sell tools and drive a truck to deliver them to factories and small businesses. I bought my lot from our tool company, and any sales made by those businesses went to my account. I'll tell you more about my business later. I've been running it for 28 years now. I remember the first time I walked into the place where Mary worked, and when she smiled at me, I was captivated. She was very beautiful and had a bubbly personality. We hit it off right away. The only problem was that I lived in Steubenville, Ohio, and she worked in Warren, Ohio, which were about 60 miles apart. I usually visit businesses along my route once a month. After meeting Mary, I asked her out, and we quickly became a couple. I went to see her every weekend. We had been together for about 3 months when I asked her to marry me. I was 26 years old and had dated quite a few women, but I had never felt the same way about them as I did about Mary. She was 24 years old and had recently graduated from college. She had been working as a secretary for about 6 months. On our first 2 dates, we kissed and hugged. On the third date, I told her that I had rented a room and was going to stay the night after dinner, some dancing and drinking. She came to my room, and we made love. We got married 6 months later and went on a cruise for our honeymoon. We flew to Florida, where a cruise ship tour bus met us. After boarding and before the ship left the dock, we had sex. Then we went to meet the captain, and the guides showed us around the ship. Our lunches were included, and we either ate or had sex for 3 days. That's not entirely true, but we did it a lot. A little gambling during the day, drinking and dancing at night. On the second day of the cruise, the ship docked and we went to the beach. I don't know why, but there were 2 beaches, one only for nudists. Mary said, "Why not? No one knows us, and it seems quite brave." I agreed with her idea, and we headed to the nudist beach. We were young and just having fun. There was a sign at the entrance that read, "Sex on the beach is prohibited." I thought it was quite funny. As we took off our clothes, grabbed towels, and headed to the beach, I was surprised by the number of people there. It seemed like there were mostly couples, as well as some groups of women. Didn't see any guys sitting together, but I was too busy looking at all the women. I think Mary looked at the men too, although she didn't say anything. All I knew was that the men were looking at Mary as we passed by. I thought perhaps the decision to go to a nude beach was a mistake. Mary and I moved as far away from most other people as possible. The cruise line provided us with blankets to lie on and extra towels. After a couple of hours, we decided to have lunch. The cruise line provided a buffet under a picnic shelter. We had to show our room key so they knew we were from the cruise. As we prepared to walk to the shed, I asked Mary to wrap a towel around her lower half. I said it was bad enough that these men could see her breasts. She laughed as we headed to the locker room. I was right. Men did look at her. After the cruise, we lived in Warren. I gave up my rental mobile home in Steubenville, and renting a truck to move my stuff was a no-brainer. We lived in the apartment for about 6 months. Mary found out she was pregnant, so we started looking for a house. Over the next 3 years, we had 2 daughters. Janet was the eldest, followed by Susan. Mary's mother looked after the girls while Mary and I worked. Life seemed pretty good. We had problems like most marriages, but we always worked them out. My job required me to be on the road 5 days a week. Since it was my business, I decided to take days off to be with my family. I usually returned home as often as possible, but stayed in motels maybe twice a week on average. This was the best option for us. 10 years later, our sexual activity decreased significantly. We still made love at least a couple of times a month. At this point, I should mention that Mary gained a lot of weight. I also gained a couple of pounds, but Mary never lost any weight after having our girls. Every few months, she went on a new diet. She didn't tell me how much she gained, but she wasn't wearing a swimsuit. I saw that she had gained weight, but I told her that I still loved her and would always be there for her. She carried this extra weight all the years while the girls were growing up. I told her over and over that I loved her and didn't care how much she weighed. While Susan was still in high school, Mary became even more depressed. Our sex life almost stopped. She gained even more weight and went to the doctor. He told her she needed to lose weight if she wanted to see her grandchildren grow up. We didn't have grandchildren yet, but Mary decided she needed help. The doctor suggested gastric plastic surgery. We looked into it, and Mary had to talk to a psychiatrist and nutritionist to see if she could handle the surgery and the consequences. Our insurance covered the surgery, which was a big relief for me. We discussed it, and I told her that I would be with her and support her as much as I could. She underwent surgery and spent 4 days in the hospital. I was with her every day. The doctor said everything went well and she now needs to follow the nutritionist's recommendations. Mary could barely eat anything other than baby food and other soft foods for a month. After 3 months, she could eat almost normal food, but her stomach was now very small. She could only eat a few bites before she felt full. What was it called? Mary had to eat small meals 6 times a day. It sounded like a lot, but one meal could be just half a banana. She found it hard to cook for me, so I told her I'd cook for myself while she followed her new diet. The good part was that Mary lost weight quickly. After 6 months, she had lost 70 pounds. By the end of the year, she had lost over 100 pounds. The doctors were happy with the results. Now it was up to Mary to keep the weight off. She looked great to me, but she was still unhappy. She walked or used the treadmill every day. People always complimented her about the weight loss. When I asked what was bothering her, she said it was the extra skin hanging on her. It was mostly hidden, except for her hands. She wanted her upper arms to be smaller. As always, I supported her through the entire process. She had outpatient surgery and needed nursing care for the first week. She always used her vacation for operations. One downside was that our insurance didn't cover it because they considered it cosmetic surgery. She went back to work but wore long-sleeved shirts until her arms healed. Her arms looked smaller and she got more compliments. During all these surgeries and recoveries, our sex life almost stopped. She always said she needed time to recover after gastric surgery and arm surgery. She seemed happier, probably because of all the compliments and attention. For some reason, she became more selfish. Everything was about her. She watched medical shows on TV and said she wanted liposuction. When I asked what it was, she said it was removing extra fat from the stomach area, like a tummy tuck. I told her she looked fine and that people didn't need to see her bare stomach. We argued, and in the end, she won again. She stayed in the hospital for a couple of days. Our insurance paid about half the cost, but they considered part of the surgery cosmetic. I stayed with her and helped her at home. She couldn't lift anything for several months, so I did most of the cooking and cleaning. It was strange how she started acting more like a boss than a loving wife. After she recovered, she told me she wanted breast surgery. We discussed why she needed implants. She said she didn't want bigger breasts, but didn't like that they sagged and only looked good in a bra. She said she would do the surgery whether I liked it or not. The surgery was done as an outpatient procedure, and I have to admit, after they healed, they looked good. Insurance didn't pay anything, and Mary spent almost all of our savings. When I told her about this, she said it was our savings, not just mine. There was no use arguing with her. I asked if she was done with surgeries, and I couldn't believe it when she said she wanted another one. I asked, "What else do you need? You've had gastric surgery, arm reduction, tummy tuck, and breast surgery. You look 15 years younger." I added, "Although I can never touch it." She was watching another TV show about a facelift. They would remove excess skin under the neck and wrinkles around the lips and eyes. She promised this was the last operation. It was an outpatient procedure, but she needed 2 weeks off work to recover. Well, she went through it. As always, I was there for her. I have to admit, when she came out of surgery, she looked like she had been in a car accident. Her face was bruised and swollen, and her head was bandaged from chin to crown. I took a couple of days off to be home with her. She didn't want anyone to see her. She had enough medication that she didn't know where she was. I couldn't believe how quickly she healed. After a few days, the bandages were removed, and she could wash and clean herself up. After 2 weeks, she looked better. She had stitches behind her ears, but wore a wig so no one could see them. A month later, she looked great. It didn't change her appearance much, but without the wrinkles, she looked much younger. The doctors gave her before and after photos. She looked 15 to 20 years younger. She was more satisfied than ever. She started buying sexier clothes and seemed more confident. Our daughters were happy with their mother's new look. Janet said she didn't think she could go through all that pain and that her husband would have to accept her as she is. Susan stood up for her mother, saying there's nothing wrong with looking good if you can afford it. Our lives went on, and I thought we would become closer. But that didn't happen. When I returned from trips, Mary never seemed happy to see me. She didn't even ask about my days. All she talked about was herself and how everyone said she looked good. She even told me the girls in the office wanted to see her breasts, and she showed them. I thought maybe she showed them to some of the guys, too. Our sex life didn't improve. The only time we had sex was after she drank. Since she didn't eat much anymore, alcohol affected her faster. So, if we went to a family event or dinner, I had a chance at sex. When I asked her to go somewhere with me, she usually found an excuse not to go. It seemed like she was ashamed of me. She never said this, but that's the impression I got. We went to family events or met with old friends, and it wasn't too bad. We spent the evening listening to everyone say how good Mary looked and how lucky I was to have her. I got tired of hearing this, especially when some of my friends joked about how they would spend more time in bed if she were their wife. If only they knew. For the past 5 years, since all these surgeries began, we were lucky if we had sex twice a year. I recently realized that if she drank, I might get lucky. I started wondering if she was cheating on me. She didn't want to go anywhere with me. She began going out with her friends once a month. I looked for signs of cheating. When she wasn't home, I checked her emails. I knew her password and read all her deleted messages. I found nothing but messages to friends about enjoying the attention. I checked her underwear and our phone logs from the last few months. Again, nothing. Her cell phone had no new numbers. I knew almost everyone she worked with. I saw men interested in her, but I didn't notice anything unusual. At her Christmas party, she avoided me. I kept an eye on her, but other than a few dances and conversations with friends, I saw nothing suspicious. Several men tried to hit on her, but she brushed them off, so I didn't interfere. Everyone said they wished they had a woman like Mary. I wanted to say, I wish I could. On the dance floor, it looked like flirting on both sides. Mary often looked at me, and any flirting stopped. At least I got sex that night. I think all the attention and drinking played a role. Now sex was just physical for Mary, not love. There was no real affection, no hugging and little kissing. Afterward, she would go to the shower as if I had something contagious. Life hadn't been the same since the surgeries began. I felt like Mary thought she was too good for me now. I had to wonder how long our marriage would last. I even offered to go shopping with her, though she knew I didn't like it. She said her friends or our daughters would go with her. If she went with her friends, I sometimes followed her. They went to the mall and had lunch. She ate like a bird and usually brought home leftovers. I didn't see anything unusual. Maybe I was paranoid. Whenever I talked to her, it turned into an argument. One day I asked if she had a boyfriend. She called me names and said she never cheated on me and that I was just jealous of her appearance. I couldn't believe it. Was I jealous? I sat with her for 5 years through all these surgeries and never complained. On the last 2 girls' nights, I even followed her. I wore a baseball cap and sat in the far corner of the room. I tried to avoid being noticed. She danced and flirted with several guys. Nothing serious. Maybe because her friends were married and she didn't want witnesses. Mary was 50 but looked much younger. She danced and flirted with men of all ages, mostly in good shape. She liked muscles. Both times I followed her, I got home before her. I was glad she drank because then I had a chance to have sex. I needed to do something to save our marriage. I didn't know if I loved her as much as before, but we were still married, and I decided to try. I bought us a cruise ticket. It was a 3-day, 2-night cruise to the Bahamas like our honeymoon. This was our first vacation and real time together since her surgeries. I was surprised she wasn't excited. Maybe she didn't want to be with me for 3 days. Anyway, she took time off. I found a friend to cover my route. I decided to make one last attempt to save our marriage. I couldn't keep living like this. I felt more like a house robot than a husband. I drove to the airport in Cleveland, Ohio. I parked in long-term parking and we flew to Florida, where a cruise line bus met us. I felt good and hoped the cruise would help. We boarded the ship and went to our cabin. The first thing I did was hug her from behind like we did on our honeymoon. "John, what are you doing?" I thought we could make love like we did on our honeymoon. "For God's sake, we're older now. I need to get ready for the party." It wasn't the start I expected, but I had 2 nights and 3 days to hope for a change. She looked great for the party. She even smiled when I told her how good she looked. Maybe this would work, I thought. We met hundreds of people at the party. Mary said where she was from and always mentioned her age. She received all the compliments she wanted. After the party, we went to our dining room. We had permanent seats throughout the cruise for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, sitting with the same group of people. Of course, there were other restaurants on the ship for casual dining or room service. Since all meals were included, most guests ate in the main dining room if they stayed on board. We sat at a table with 3 other couples. Henry and Eleanor were celebrating their 40th wedding anniversary. Carl and Judy, I later found out, weren't married, nor were Tony and Pia. I'll tell you more about them later. We ordered dinner and talked with the other guests at our table. I told Henry we were celebrating our 25th anniversary. Carl looked at Mary and said he couldn't believe Mary had been married for so long. Then I had to listen to all the compliments about Mary and how lucky I was. Carl said he didn't understand why Mary married an old man like me. He thought I must have money. Of course, Mary laughed and said she would. I already knew Carl would be a problem. Tony and Pia were more reserved, letting Carl lead the conversation. Carl suggested we all go to the main hall for music and dancing after dinner. Henry and Eleanor declined, saying they wanted to go out on deck and relax. To be honest, I would have preferred that too. But Mary quickly agreed and said we would be happy to go to the hall. Judy didn't say anything but looked at me several times. Tony and Pia were going to do what Carl wanted. I'll skip ahead a bit and talk about Carl, Judy, Tony, and Pia. I got most of the information from Judy while Mary and Carl danced. Judy was a waitress in Pittsburgh. She was 42 years old and quite attractive. I wondered what she was doing with Carl, who was 38 and rather arrogant. They didn't seem right for each other. Although from a woman's point of view, Carl could be considered handsome, I'm sure. Cute. And, as I later found out, with 6-pack abs. "How did you and Carl meet?" I asked Judy. "We're not a couple. Carl is a regular at our restaurant. He always flirted and seemed nice. I know he's arrogant, but he was always nice to me." "I didn't want to assume anything," I started to say when Judy interrupted me. "He asked me out many times, and I always said no. I've never been married and don't date much." Carl told me that he and his friend each got 2 cruise tickets for high sales. They both work in pharmacy supplies. They mainly sell to doctors, clinics, and hospitals. Carl asked if I wanted to go on a cruise with him. It wouldn't cost me anything. I'm not stupid, and I knew I'd have to have sex with him, but he's nice to look at, and it wouldn't be that much of a price. He said I didn't have to do anything I didn't want to do. I thought it was a good offer and agreed. He asked if I had a girlfriend who would like to go with Tony. Tony was only 30 years old and would probably want someone younger. He had recently broken up with his girlfriend. Carl mentioned that the same rules would apply to any woman who came with us. I liked the idea because it meant I'd have a girlfriend. I've known Pia for several years. She's 27 and a waitress and dancer at a local club. I knew she was a little wild and would immediately agree to a free cruise to the Bahamas. So here we are. I think Carl was a little charmed when he saw Pia. She's really pretty. He probably wishes he was with her instead of me. No wonder Tony couldn't be happier. We flew here from Pittsburgh. I hope everything works out. I could use a little vacation. "So you and Carl are just friends?" I asked. "Yeah, I don't think it's going to go any further. It's too much of a party for me. This cruise was just a nice vacation for me," Judy replied. The 6 of us entered the hall and everyone sat down together. I asked Mary to dance and took her hand. I'm not much of a dancer, but I tried to enjoy the moment with my wife. All she talked about was finding new friends to hang out with. It felt like she wanted to be with anyone but me. After our dance, we sat down. The others returned to the table, and Carl immediately asked Mary to dance. She didn't even look at me as she stood up. She had a big smile on her face. Tony and Pia went dancing too, and I stayed sitting and talking to Judy. It was then that she told me about herself, Carl, and the others, and how they arrived on the ship. Judy was a beautiful woman. I could understand why Carl asked her out. She had a pleasant personality and seemed really caring. We talked about our families and work. She had a daughter about the same age as my youngest. I told her about my tool sales and delivery business. She really seemed interested. I thought maybe she was a good listener because she was a waitress. 4 songs played before the others returned to the table. Mary said she danced with Carl and Tony. They had to stop and rest a bit. I didn't say anything. I didn't want to start an argument over something as small as a few dances. Carl ordered drinks, and I was surprised that Mary took one. She didn't handle alcohol very well. I danced with Mary one more time, and then she danced with Carl and Tony most of the time. I think she was trying to outdo Pia. Apparently no one told her that Pia was also a dancer and waitress at the club. I did 2 slow dances with Judy. She didn't show off or act like she was in some kind of competition. I really enjoyed spending time with her. It was getting late and we needed to rest up before the big day tomorrow. The ship would drop us off at the beach, where we were to spend the entire day. There were 2 beaches and a casino. I also bought tickets to a show with topless dancers and everything. I thought I could get rid of Carl so Mary and I could enjoy the cruise, but that did not happen. While they were dancing, Mary told Carl about our plans for tomorrow. When they returned to the table, Mary mentioned that she had invited everyone to the beach the next day. I said, "That's nice," but probably didn't look too happy. Judy and I took a few steps away from the others when she said, "Sorry, we're interrupting your anniversary." "Sure, here's the rewritten text according to your guidelines." "Would you like me to talk to Carl?" Judy asked. "No," I replied. "It's probably as much Mary's fault as it is Carl's. We'll just have to see how things go." Judy smiled. "John, thanks for keeping me company. I had a wonderful evening. I didn't have to worry about chasing Carl away for half the evening. You're a good person. I hope Mary sees that." I didn't know what to think. Was she just being nice? I wondered if Carl or Tony had made advances toward Mary. The dance floor was crowded and I couldn't always see them. Mary hugged Carl and Tony and said she would see them tomorrow. We headed to our cabin. I watched Mary undress. She had a beautiful body, though it cost a lot of money. We got into bed and I tried to hug her. She told me she was sorry but had drunk and eaten too much, and her stomach hurt. She went to the bathroom and I heard her vomiting. She came back and said she just couldn't eat the way she used to. She apologized and said she might feel better the next day. She took some medicine for her stomach. I lay there thinking the first day of 3 didn't go well. Instead of bringing us closer, it seemed to separate us. The next morning, there was an all-you-can-eat breakfast buffet. I got myself a plate of food. Mary returned with bagels. She said she had eaten too much the night before and paid for it. Eleanor brought Henry a plate of food. She said if he went on his own, he would take everything he wasn't allowed to eat. He laughed and said how she always worries about him. Instead of getting angry, he kissed her. After breakfast, everyone went back to their cabins to change into beach clothes. Carl walked next to Judy. I thought maybe she told him something. Mary didn't say much as we headed to the beach. Carl spoke up. "Anyone for a nudist beach?" He looked at Mary and she smiled at him. "No," I replied. "I don't have a body anyone wants to see." I tried to make it a joke, but I meant it. Mary looked at me strangely. If it was just the 2 of us, I might have considered it, but not with Carl and Tony staring at her. Judy spoke up. "I'm not crazy about the nudist scene either. 20 years ago, I might have considered it, but I've grown up since then." Pia said she just wanted to get in the water. Tony just wanted to see women in swimsuits and naked. He didn't care. We headed to the usual beach. We laid out blankets and towels. We also rented sun loungers. "Damn it! I'm too old to lie on the ground." I took Mary's hand and asked her to walk with me to the water. Everyone got up and went into the ocean. All 3 women wore 2-piece swimsuits. They all looked great. Pia's swimsuit was the most revealing. Mary's swimsuit showed a lot of breasts. It was the first time I saw her in it. She bought it for the trip. From the way she walked with me, I realized she was showing off in front of Carl, who was walking behind us. Our cruise has not gone as planned. I promised myself I would do my best not to start an argument with her on this cruise. The whole purpose of the cruise was to bring us closer together, but that didn't happen. We were all in the water, just floating lazily. I tried to hug Mary, but she said not in front of everyone. She didn't even kiss me. I was a little sad and just swam for a bit. It didn't surprise me that Carl was immediately at her side. As soon as I walked 10 feet away, there they were, acting like best friends. Why did he want her when he had Judy, who was older than him but honestly looked just as good? I was swimming while my mind was busy wondering what I should do next. When I encountered another person, it was Judy. "Hello, stranger," Judy said. "Are you enjoying the ocean?" "It's nice," I said. "I just wanted to let you know that I mentioned to Carl that you wanted to spend more time with Mary for your anniversary." "What did he say?" I asked. He didn't really say anything, just grinned. I respect him less and less. I have to admit he's still acting nice on this cruise, but I think he'd rather be with Pia or Mary. I decided to enjoy my little vacation and do what I liked. I feel the same way. I'm doing my best to enjoy this trip, but I'm not going to beg Mary to do something with me. If our marriage fails, it will be because she made her own choices. We all got out of the water and sat down on our chairs. Mary and Pia decided to lie down on the blankets and sunbathe. Judy said she doesn't like sunbathing. She would burn first, so she sat under the umbrella next to me before I could say anything. Carl suggested that Mary apply lotion to her. She said please, as if I wasn't there. Tony was applying lotion to Pia. I needed to get out of there. I didn't know how much more of this flirting I could take. I told everyone I didn't like sitting in the sun and thought I'd go upstairs to the pavilion and gamble a little. I asked Mary if she wanted to come with me, but she preferred to sunbathe. I got looks of rejection from Judy. I told Mary if she changed her mind, I would be at the slot machines. Otherwise, I would see her at 3 at the lunch buffet. I played the slot machines and got free drinks. I thought about Mary and realized our marriage was on its last legs. I was just going to see how the rest of the cruise went. I knew I was drinking too much, but I didn't care. A few seconds later, a woman sat down next to me at the machines. I looked, and it was Judy. I was surprised to see her. "What are you doing here? Where are Mary and the others?" "They decided to go to the nude beach shortly after you left. I told Carl it wasn't for me, but he didn't care. I told them I'd play the slot machines and meet them at 3. I'm sorry, John. He's coming for Mary, and I can't stop him. Only you can. No, it's up to Mary. She just has to say no. I admit, I don't like Carl. He's arrogant, but Mary chose to be with him. She wasn't forced. I was sad because I hoped this cruise might bring Mary and me closer, but it didn't. So I decided to go with the flow and see what happens." Judy joined me at the machines. She didn't have much money, so I shared some of my coins with her. "You don't have to do that," Judy said. "It's my pleasure," I replied. "Besides, I'm winning. I enjoy the company." We played on different machines, and I refilled her glass when it was empty. This is what I wanted to do with Mary, but she wasn't interested in me. Maybe she thought I was too old, even though we were almost the same age. I wasn't tall, dark, or handsome, but I was always kind to her. I was always there when she needed me. Now she didn't need me anymore. We met the others at the buffet. I looked at Mary and she knew I was angry. "Did you enjoy showing off?" I asked. "I didn't do anything wrong," Mary replied. "I'm not ashamed of my body, you just don't want to have fun." "If letting strange men touch you is fun, then it's not fun for me," I said. Tony spoke up. "Hey man, leave her alone. So what if she had some fun?" "She's not your wife, so stay out of this," I snapped. Tony challenged me. "Got a problem? Let's go out and settle this." I knew I couldn't fight him. Instead, I got a plate of food and ate alone. Mary sat with Carl and Tony. Judy and Peter went to the toilet. I finished eating and went to Mary. "I'm going back to the ship. Will you come with me?" I asked. "Of course," she replied. We argued on the way back about her avoiding me and spending time with Carl. "They're just friends," she said. "We're married and should be celebrating our 25th anniversary. Instead, you spend all your time with Carl and Tony," I said. "They're young and fun. I was just flirting," she replied. I didn't believe her. "Tonight, we're going to the show as planned. We have tickets," I insisted. "I'm not interested in your old show. I'm going to party on the top deck," she said. We didn't speak again on the way to the ship. She went to our cabin and I sat by the pool, talking with Henry and Eleanor. They seemed so happy together. They told me their secret to 40 years of marriage, putting each other first and always communicating. They never went to bed angry and never kept secrets. "We didn't always agree, but our love always won," Eleanor said. I picked up the flyer for the party Mary mentioned. It was a progressive nudist party. I asked a ship employee about it. It starts as an evening party with everyone in smart clothes. Each hour they remove some clothing. It ends with swimsuits or underwear, then only nudists stay. Guests can leave any time. Food and drinks are included. It's $50 for a couple or $30 for one, she explained. I thanked her and went back to the cabin. Mary was getting dressed in a beautiful skirt and blouse. I hoped she was ready for the show. I put on a suit and tie. "You look wonderful, Mary. I hope we enjoy the show," I said. "I'm going to the party, not the show. You can come if you want," she replied. "Mary, it's another nudist party. I'll probably come back when everyone's in swimsuits," I said. "Carl and Tony are hilarious. You didn't give them a chance," she said. "A chance for what? To sleep with you? We're adults. We should have more common sense." "I'm going to the show," I replied. "If you want to come with me and save our marriage, then meet me. If you prefer your party and friends, I'll know when you go to the third deck. Just to be clear, our marriage will be over if you go to the party. I know you better than anyone." "You won't end our marriage over a party. I don't believe you," Mary replied. I went into the lounge, ordered a drink, and sat down, watching the stairs to the third deck. I saw many young couples go up. I noticed Tony and Pia, but they probably didn't see me. Then I saw Carl and Judy. Judy looked at me, but Carl headed up the stairs. She paused for a moment and glanced my way. A few minutes later, Mary came in and stood by the stairs. We looked at each other, and I stood up, hoping she would come to me. Maybe we had a chance while we were looking at each other. She turned and walked up to the third deck without looking back. I gave her an ultimatum, and she made her choice. At that moment, I realized our marriage was over. I decided to try to enjoy the rest of the evening and the next day a little. It was after 9, and I knew the party had started. Several more people were climbing the stairs. Soon, I saw a woman coming down the stairs. It was Judy. She came to my table and sat down. "I'm sorry, John. You deserve so much more than you're getting. You're too good a person to be treated like that." "Why aren't you at the big party?" I asked. "Carl was waiting upstairs to see if you and Mary would come. When he saw that Mary was alone, he laughed. He walked up to her and kissed her. That was enough for me. I told him I'd save him $30 and left. Remember, when we first talked, I told you I was going on this cruise. But I didn't owe it to Carl. I thought I might have to be with him, but it wasn't a big deal. He was too drunk the first night to do anything. He just passed out when we got back to our cabin. I have 2 tickets to a stage show on the island if you're interested. The tickets are paid for and you only need to have fun. Do you want to come with me? I just have an extra ticket." She was dressed nicely in a white blouse and black skirt. She later told me she was wearing a swimsuit underneath. I mentioned that maybe we could go for a swim in the pool when we got back from the show. She smiled at me as we took a taxi to the pavilion. The show was really good for a couple of hours. I enjoyed myself. I knew my marriage was over, so I enjoyed the moment. There were dancers, comedians, a juggler, and some great singers. Judy and I returned after midnight. She told me she had a wonderful evening and that Mary was a very foolish woman. I walked her to her cabin. She kissed me on the cheek and thanked me again for the invitation. I returned to my cabin hoping Mary was there, but of course, she wasn't. The room was exactly the same as when we left it. I didn't want to be alone, so I sat in the hall for a couple of hours, trying to figure out what to do next. I could see the stairs to the third deck and watched people returning from the party. Not everyone stayed until the end. I was surprised to see Paul walking down the stairs alone. She headed towards her cabin. I thought I might miss Mary and those 2 jokers. I may have missed it when I went to the men's room a few times. It was 2 o'clock in the morning when I returned to my cabin. Mary was still missing. I tried to sleep but couldn't. At 4 in the morning, there was a knock on the door. I opened it, and it was one of the ship's workers. He had a drunken Mary whom he brought to our cabin. I thanked him and even gave him a $5 tip. What a waste of money. He could have thrown her overboard and I wouldn't have cared. She was wearing only a swimsuit and a robe, probably provided by the ship's crew. He handed me the bag with her clothes. I threw her on the bed. She was in a terrible state. I took off her robe and noticed that someone had put a swimsuit on her. It was all twisted and the bottom part was on inside out. I realized she had cheated on me. I left the swimsuit on her. It was clear she was used. I needed to know if she was forced or if she went willingly. It wouldn't change my opinion of her or our upcoming divorce. I was a calm person, but if she was really used, I might have to deal with those responsible. Time would show. It was the morning of the 3rd day of our cruise. We had to leave the ship by 5 in the evening. The ship would stay all day and we could leave earlier if we wanted. Our return flight was at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. Of course, I couldn't sleep, so I packed my things. I only had 1 suitcase. Mary had 2 suitcases and a carry-on bag. I became increasingly angry as I packed. This was not good. I didn't want to do anything that could get me arrested. I took my phone and took some photos of Mary. I didn't know if they would help, but I had no other proof. After packing, I went to one of the cafes on board and started drinking coffee. It was after 6 in the morning, and I decided to do something stupid. I went to Judy's cabin and knocked on the door. Why? I knocked quietly. I don't know. Judy opened the door and was surprised to see me, especially so early. She was already dressed, meaning she had probably gotten up a long time ago. "John, what are you doing here?" "You know why I'm here. I need to find out what Carl and his friends did to my wife." "John, please calm down. Let's go to the cafe and I'll tell you everything I know." Pia came back at 1 in the morning and I talked to her for a long time. Carl and Tony returned. "Give me the key to the cabin and I'll meet you there soon," she said. She left and came back a minute later. We went to a cafe and she told me what she knew from Pia. Pia was young and carefree. Being naked was not a big deal for her. "John, what I'm about to say is unpleasant. You won't like it. I wouldn't tell you if you didn't deserve better than Mary. I'm sorry, but she's not a faithful woman. I don't mean to insult your wife. Tell me what you know. I saw her being used until she was exhausted. I need to know how prepared she was for this." Pia said 4 of them went to the party. The first hour was just mingling with other guests. Every hour they took off some clothes. By midnight, they were in underwear or swimsuits. Some couples left, but dozens stayed. When the last clothes came off, it turned into a party where everyone swapped partners. Pia said she had sex with Tony while Mary was with Carl. They also swapped partners and had sex on a nude beach during the day. Pia said they did it in the ocean after sex with Tony and Carl. Pia got dressed again. She said that was enough for her, but Mary wanted to continue. "Did Mary use drugs?" I asked. "Yes and no, John. She knew what she was doing." Pia said no one was forced to do anything. After that, Pia returned to her cabin. I lowered my head and felt tears in my eyes. Not for Mary, but for myself. For being a fool and staying with her for so long. "I'm so sorry, John. You were the best part of this cruise for me. I enjoyed our time together. I'm sorry for your marriage. Trust me, John. You deserve better." So what did Carl say when he returned to the cabin? He was too drunk to say anything, but he smelled of alcohol and sex. I couldn't sleep after he went to bed. I sat in a chair and read a book. Then I got dressed and went out for coffee. "You knocked. Too bad you're with that jerk." "I'm not really with him, John. I went on that cruise, but I didn't have sex with him. It was good. After finding out what he's like, I don't want to have sex with him. Nothing in common. We'll have breakfast if he wakes up in time and have lunch." Our plane leaves for Pittsburgh at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Breakfast was at 8, and it was almost that time. I checked and saw Henry and Eleanor at the table, both smiling. I walked to the table and sat down. Judy joined us. "Where is everyone else?" Henry asked. "We wanted to say goodbye. We're leaving the ship at 10, Judy replied. "We have an early flight to Iowa." Judy said everyone had a long night, so they were sleeping in. Maybe they'll wake up around lunchtime. We all laughed a bit. My smile was fake, but this sweet couple shouldn't know about those jerks I left behind. We had a nice breakfast, and I said goodbye to Henry and Eleanor. After they left, I told Judy that spending time with her was the only good thing about the cruise. I even said I wished I had met her 25 years ago before Mary. "Thanks, John, but I was a bit wild when I was young. After my daughter was born, I became more mature and family-oriented. It was nice meeting you, John. If you're ever in Pittsburgh, come to the East Side restaurant. Breakfast is on me." She hugged and kissed me lightly, and we went our separate ways. I went back to my cabin and saw my drunk wife still on the bed. I placed her plane ticket on the dresser, grabbed my suitcase, and headed for the exit of the ship. I sat on the deck as the ship docked. I wasn't the first to get off, but I was close. I took the bus to the airport. I hoped to exchange my ticket for an earlier flight. Luckily, I got on a plane to Cleveland at 11. I turned off my phone on the plane and turned it on while walking to my car at the airport. I had 3 missed calls from Mary starting at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. As I got into the car, the phone rang again. It was Mary. "John, where are you?" she shouted. "Good morning and happy anniversary. You're finally up. The ship docked at 10 and I got your call after 1 o'clock. Why didn't you answer? I was worried. Where are you? Why didn't you wake me?" You have a lot of questions, Mary. I'll try to answer. I didn't answer because my phone was off on the plane. And you slept like that? Airplane? Where are you, John? I'm in the car heading home. After you were left on the doorstep, I saw everything I needed to. Last night I gave you a choice and you chose your friends. I boarded the ship when it docked and took an early flight home. What about me? What should I do? If you call me that again, I'll hang up. I left your ticket on the dresser. Take it and your luggage on the plane. You can use the free bus. The plane will take you back to Cleveland. Will you meet me at the airport? No. Find your way home on your own. I hung up. Over the next hour, she called 4 more times. I was driving up to our driveway when Susan called. Dad, what's going on? Mom said you left her in Florida. What's going on? I left her. She has a ticket to Cleveland, but I don't want anything to do with her anymore. She can tell you why. If she doesn't tell the truth, I'll share my side. Will you meet her at the airport? She's my mom. I'm not leaving her stranded. I can't believe you did that, Dad. It's simple, Susan. She cheated on me with several men. She can give you the details, though she might blame me. I'm not going to stay with her anymore. I'm meeting a lawyer and leaving. I should have left sooner. But I waited until you and Janice were on your own. Janice is married and you're in college. I'll make sure you get any help you need. Dad, what happens when I bring her home? You won't hurt her, will you? Of course not. I've never hit your mother, though I've wanted to. I'll stay in Janet's old room until I leave. As long as she stays away from me, there won't be a problem. I lived with her for 25 years. I started packing my personal things. I didn't have much, so I began loading my tool truck. I had a lot of space since I hadn't loaded it for next week's trip. My eldest daughter and her husband arrived around 7. Dad, what's going on? Susan called and said she needed to pick up Mom at the airport. How many times do I have to explain? Your mother cheated on me during our anniversary cruise. I'm not sharing details, but she ended our marriage. There's no chance of reconciliation. I'm packing my things and will leave in a few days. I'll let you girls know where I'm moving. Another car pulled up. It was Susan and her mother. Mary was crying. This didn't upset me, it made things worse. Paul, Janet's husband, carried Mary's suitcases. I went back to packing. Mary went to the kitchen with the girls. I heard them talking. Janice made coffee, and Mary claimed she drank too much and was taken advantage of at a party I didn't attend. Her story was different from mine. She painted herself as a victim. I got a cup of coffee, and Janet asked if her mother's story was true. Janet, your mother and I know the truth. She wasn't a victim. I'll tell you everything after you girls leave unless she wants me to tell you now. I'll show you her pictures and tell you about her friends. Mary turned pale. I didn't have many photos, but she didn't know that. You girls can go home. I'll talk to you tomorrow after I talk to your father. Susan, thanks for picking me up. I know you need to get back to school. Thank you both for being here and for Paul bringing my suitcases. Mary played the victim again. I've seen it many times. I kissed the girls goodbye and told them I'd keep in touch. I wanted them to know I wouldn't stay married to their mother for long. As soon as they left, Mary started. It's your fault for not going to the party. I drank too much. What photos do you have? Mary, stop. I know everything, including your time with Carl and Tony on the nude beach. Pia must have told you. She was the only one there. I knew it was true. No, I didn't talk to Pia. I just learned a lot. You made bad choices after Carl and Tony. Was that all you wanted? How did you know? Were you there? Mary, it's all coming out. Do you remember being abandoned at our door with your bathing suit inside out? Tell your daughters about that, you bastard, and you are unfaithful. I'll stay in Janet's old room until I find a place. If you leave, I'll take everything. You'll agree to my divorce proposal or the truth will come out. What will your family and friends think when they find out what you did? She had nothing more to say. I packed my things except for a few clothes. I slept poorly and saw my lawyer the next day. I told him about the cruise. All I wanted was to end the marriage. He asked for proof, and I only had pictures of her sleeping. He said it wasn't enough to prove infidelity. I told him I wanted my business and half our savings. She could keep the house and everything in it. She could have her car, and I'd take my pickup and business car. Our state splits property in half. If I'm willing to give her everything but the business and she agrees, we might get approved. I told him to prepare the paperwork, and I'll bring her in to explain. That evening, she was back to her old ways, wanting to see the pictures I had. I told her we would go to my lawyer, who would explain the divorce terms to her. If she agreed within 60 days, our divorce would be final, and I would send her the photos I had. She said she would hire her own lawyer and I would have to pay for it. I explained that if she did that, I would file for divorce on the grounds of her cheating and being at the party. I would also file a claim for loss of spousal affection against Carl and Tony. I told her I would bring everyone to court to testify. I had nothing to lose if she tried to ruin my job. Most of what I said I wasn't sure was true, but she didn't know either. If she saw a lawyer, she might fear it would all come out. The next day, I drove to Steubenville and found a trailer park with mobile homes for rent. I didn't need to buy a home, just a place to sleep and relax when not working. I still had friends and family nearby. Warren was less than 2 hours away for visiting his daughters or for them to visit me. I found an older 3-bedroom mobile home that was just fine for me. I paid the deposit and the first month's rent. It was furnished well enough, but I had to buy a TV and DVD player. I unloaded my stuff from the truck and went to the tool yard to pick up my orders. While there, I filed a change of address and changed the beneficiaries of my insurance and benefits to my daughters. After making deliveries that day, I spent the night in my new rented mobile home for the first time in a week. I slept well. The next day, I called my lawyer and made an appointment for Mary and me. I returned to my old house that night and gave Mary an ultimatum. She could meet me at the lawyer's office at noon the next day or hire her own lawyer and we'd do it the hard way. She was thinking a lot. She wanted to ruin me and my business, but that would also ruin her own life. She agreed to see what my lawyer had prepared, but said she wouldn't sign anything until she fully understood it. She didn't know what evidence I might have of her cheating, which could be accepted in court. She didn't want to take the risk. We met at my lawyer's office at noon. We went into Aaron Tibbs' private office. I think Aaron being black threw Mary off balance. She had to understand that. I told him the whole story of our cruise from my point of view. John has asked me to draw up divorce terms. I believe he has made you a very generous offer. I will explain everything, and you can take it to your lawyer if you need to make sure it's fair. Aaron explained she would get the house and everything in it. She would keep her car, and I would keep my truck and business vehicle. She would get half our savings, and we would split other assets. Mrs. Hubble, this is a very generous offer from him. If you agree, the divorce will be final 60 days after signing the documents. If you don't agree, we can continue with legal proceedings. When he said to consult her lawyer, Mary looked at me. She knew if she did that, I would push the cheating wife scenario and demand a divorce. Aaron continued, "It's essentially a no-fault divorce. You both agree you don't want to be married anymore. Nobody needs to know why. John offered you the house and everything in it, including furniture and appliances. The house is paid off, right? Yes, we paid it off 2 years ago. Let's be clear. Are you saying I get the house and everything in it?" asked Mary. "Yes, and half the money in checking and savings accounts today. According to the bank statements, there are $32,000. You both will get $16,000. What about our credit cards? Who will pay them off?" asked Mary. "You have 2 joint credit cards with no balance. John has a business card with a large balance for his tools. That will be his responsibility. You have 3 cards in your name. I couldn't get information on them without your permission, but it doesn't matter. You will be responsible for them. What about cars and John's tool business? You keep your car and continue making payments if you want to keep it. John's pickup stays with him. Now, about the business. That's the key point. John's business is an LLC corporation. He pays himself a salary from the corporation's earnings. It's his life's investment, and he wants to keep the business. It costs a lot of money. Are you saying I won't get anything from it?" Mary was indignant. I chimed in, "Mary, I built this business on my own from scratch without any help from you." "What if I want my share?" asked Mary. "I will be legally obligated to sell the business and give you half the profits. You will also be responsible for half the debts for all the tools I bought recently." Mary stared at me. She knew this was the point of no return. "How much will my share be?" she asked. "I can sell the business for any amount. Before I give you a penny, I'll practically give the business away for next to nothing. I'll make sure neither of us has a penny left. Then I'll file for divorce, and what we talked about here will be invalid. You won't give up the business and the route you've spent your whole life building. It must cost a couple of $100,000. "I'm not that stupid," Aaron chimed in. "Mary, what John said is true. He can sell his business for $100 if he wants. You need to decide if he hates you enough to go that far. Are you willing to take the risk?" He made a very generous offer, and if he's telling the truth, he has witnesses and evidence. We can go to court, and he can divide all the assets in half. This includes your house, personal belongings, checking and savings accounts, cars, and even pensions. Everything will be divided in the divorce. Plus, a lot of unpleasant information will come out during the process. All he really wants is his business. He'll give you everything else. Do you hate him enough to ruin his business? I think you're making a big mistake by not accepting his offer, but it's up to you. I've already prepared the divorce papers. It's your choice now. Can I have a few days to think about it? Asked Mary. Yes, but if you make any purchases or withdraw money from these joint accounts, this document will become invalid. This includes John. I'd like to hear from you by Friday. If you want your lawyer to look at the documents, know that John asked for a divorce, not an annulment. John, what about the photos you mentioned? How can I be sure you're not using them anyway? You'll have to trust me like I trusted you for 25 years. I've never cheated on you. I was there for you through every operation, even when I was against them. I don't want our daughters to know what their mother is really like. But if you ruin my business, I won't care. I will send you the photos I have on the day of the divorce. You have my word. I signed both documents right in the office so Mary could see I was serious. Aaron, thank you for everything. No matter what happens, please call me on Friday so I know if I need to provide evidence or continue with my current life. Mary, I want you to know I loved you all these years. I did everything I could to be there for you when you were in trouble. I don't know exactly when we started going our separate ways, but I never cheated on you. We both know you can't say the same. I just don't know when it started, and I no longer care to know. Aaron will let me know your answer on Friday. I don't expect to see you again unless we go to court. I might see you at some of our kids' events, and I will be polite to you. I wish you a good life. I was anxious until Friday. I decided I would give up my business rather than give her half. During our negotiations, Mary was told there would be no alimony because she earned the same amount as me since I received a salary from the business. I visited my clients and returned to my mobile home at night. It was nice, and sometimes I sat and talked with my new neighbors. I didn't have a phone other than my cell phone because they could always reach me on it. On Friday evening, I got a call from Aaron. He said Mary came and signed the divorce papers. He has already submitted them, and the marriage will be dissolved in 60 days. I asked if she said anything about why she agreed to it. He said she talked to our daughters, and they said if she ruined my business, they would never want to see her again. I think they believed me when I told them their mother knew what she was doing. Then he told me something hard to believe. John, you're not going to like this, but she called Carl and told him you were going to incriminate him and Tony if she didn't sign the papers. I really believe he convinced her to sign the agreement. He was afraid of getting involved. I found it hard to believe she got his number to see him again. The only thing that made me angry was not getting back at Carl or Tony. These two cheated on me and laughed about it. If I could do it all over again, I would do something to get back at them. Maybe I'd get my butt kicked, but I wouldn't be such a pushover. Life went on, and I spent more time working. I liked my job. Besides, I had no reason to rush home. I called my daughters and gave them my new mobile number. I told them not to give it to Mary unless there was an emergency. I made a point to stop and see them when I was in their area. The divorce was finalized, and I made copies of the photos I had taken on my cell phone and sent them to Mary. The next day, she called me. "Who gave you my number?" I asked. "I got it from the factory. They said it was urgent, and I don't have your new mobile number. Is there a problem with the girls? What happened?" "Nothing happened. There was no emergency. I just got these photos in the mail. They're just me lying in my sleep. They don't prove anything. You lied to me." "When did I lie?" "I said I had pictures of you, and I do. I promised to send them to you, which I did. I thought you had pictures of me with Carl, Tony, and other men. I said I knew you were with these men. I never said I had pictures of you with them. You just assumed I had them. By the way, you proved me right again, and that you were in your right mind when you cheated on me. I did what I promised. Now leave me alone." I hung up. I guess it was a small victory for me, but it didn't feel great. These two guys never got revenge from me. It's a pity neither of them were married. Maybe I would complicate their marriages. My marriage was over, and life wasn't that bad. I enjoyed my job and didn't have to worry about Mary. I lived my life and did what I liked. I planned my route so I would see my daughters once or twice a month. I tried not to be there when their mother was. 2 months passed since the divorce was finalized. I know it was a dissolution of marriage, but I still call it a divorce. The company whose tools I was selling was holding a conference. They have it every year to show us the latest tools and new advertising. Since we owned our trucks and routes, we had to pay for our own advertising. Overall, it was a good business. I was my own boss and set my own hours. More than half of my sales were made over the phone, and I only had to pick up or mail the tools. I preferred delivering to my clients because they usually bought more. It was part of the sales strategy. This year's conference was at the Sheraton Inn in Pittsburgh. I booked a room for one night so I wouldn't have to travel home, even though it wasn't far. The company paid for dinner and drinks, so I often indulged. I left early on Saturday morning. It was only an hour-and-a-half drive. I decided to explore Pittsburgh a bit since I didn't visit often. I remembered Judy saying she worked at the East Side Grill, so I bought a map to find it. It was still morning when I got there and found the restaurant. I walked in and there weren't many people having breakfast. The hostess greeted me and I asked if Judy was working and if I could sit in her section. A minute later, Judy came up to the table and smiled when she saw me. "John, what are you doing here? It's so nice to see you." I replied, "I was told to come here and a beautiful young lady said she would buy me breakfast. I decided to take advantage of the offer." Judy said, "John, I've been thinking about you a lot. Is everything okay?" "Carl came here a few times and said that you and Mary were getting a divorce. He mentioned you were going to sue us all. What's that about?" I explained. I wanted a divorce from Mary and made up things to scare her. I even told her I would sue Carl and Tony for alienation of affection. My lawyer said I had no chance, but it scared Mary. "I'd like to talk to you if you have a few minutes." She glanced at her watch. "It'll be a little calmer in 15 minutes. Let me bring you a real man's breakfast and then I'll come and sit with you." She brought me pancakes, eggs, bacon, sausage, and toast. After pouring me coffee, she left a jug of it on the table. The meal was delicious. I was almost finished when she returned and sat down. She said she wouldn't be punished and finished work at noon on Saturdays. "So what really brought you to Pittsburgh, John?" she asked. "The company whose instruments I sell has a conference at the Sheraton Inn. They do it at a different location every year. I thought maybe you'd be interested in coming with me. It starts at 6. After a few speeches and a preview of the new line of instruments, they throw a big party. There will be a seafood buffet and free drinks. They even hire a small group to dance. I'd love it if you came with me." "What will you do all day until evening?" Judy asked. "I have a map and was thinking of exploring the city a bit. I don't know where exactly to go, but it will help me pass the time. So what do you think? The last time we were together, I really enjoyed your company." "Is your divorce finalized, John?" "Yes, it's been completed for a few months now. I'm currently living in a mobile home in Steubenville." "Let me make you an offer, John. I finish work in an hour. Why don't you pick me up and I'll show you around the city, and later, I'll go to the conference with you." I knew my face lit up with Judy's smile. I told her I would see her at noon. I went to pay for breakfast, but she said it was already paid for as promised. I thanked her and left a $20 tip. When I came back for her, she said we could take her car since she knew where everything was. I enjoyed it while she showed me the many sights of the city. After visiting the stadium, we went to the Carnegie Institution. It was a gigantic museum. I'd heard about it, but had never been there. She drove past her house to show me where she lived. We had to go back and get my truck. She said she would be ready by 6. It was already 5 when she dropped me off. I returned to the Sheraton, took a quick shower, and put on my suit. I headed towards Judy's house. The door was opened by a beautiful young woman. "You must be John. Mom said you would pick her up. I'm Darcy. Judy is my mom. Mom said you met on a cruise." "Yes, it's true." I was saved by the bell ringing when Judy entered the room. "Has Darcy interrogated you? She has a habit of thinking she's in charge of our relationship." "I'm just worried about you, Mom," Darcy replied. "I promised to take good care of her. I'll even give you my cell phone number if you want to find us." "Thanks, but Mom always takes her phone. It was nice meeting you, John." "It was nice meeting you too, Darcy," I replied. We talked a lot about various things, work, home, family, and so on. After the speeches and viewing of the new instruments, we found a table for 2. I knew a lot of people there and greeted them, introducing Judy as a good friend. News spread quickly in the company, and most people knew that I was divorced. I kept my word and didn't tell anyone why. While we were having dinner, I asked about Carl, Tony, and Pia. Oh, I guess you didn't know since you don't live here. But shortly after returning from the cruise, Paul was beaten up. What? What happened? I asked. She was dating a biker, and when he found out she had gone on a cruise with another man, he lost his temper. He also asked where Tony and Carl worked. Is she okay? Yes. Tony wasn't so lucky. Oh my God. Did they catch this guy? Yes, I called the police. He has already been tried and is serving 20 years for attempted murder and for attacking Pia. Damn, he was a very angry man, I remarked. He said he was going after Carl, but he was caught before he found him. So I guess Carl got lucky again. I couldn't believe my wife called him about our divorce. You were right. She really is an easygoing woman. Are you saying you're still seeing Carl? I see him when he comes to breakfast. I wouldn't go anywhere with him if he were the last person on earth. I even told the hostess at the restaurant not to seat him in my area. He still stops me when I pass by. I learned more about him on the cruise than I wanted to. I really don't like him, especially the way he treats other people. We stopped talking and started dancing. I'm not the best dancer, but I had fun. Judy didn't mind. We just enjoyed being together. We skipped a few fast songs but went back to the slow ones. She felt wonderful in my arms. She didn't seem to mind resting her head on my shoulder. You smell so good, I told her. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Your compliments seem sincere. I'm used to fake compliments waitresses get all the time. Yours seem real. Trust me, they are. Our evening was coming to an end. This is the most enjoyable time I've had in a long time, I told her. I wish it didn't end so soon. I love being with you. It's like I've known you my whole life, John. This doesn't have to end. I don't want to be forward, but I don't have to go home early. I like being with you, too. Are you saying what I think you're saying? Honestly, I don't want to misunderstand you. Why was I so nervous? Let me rephrase that. I haven't been with a man in a long time. Even before the cruise, I didn't do anything. I want you to know that I'm not sleeping around. I'm drawn to you, though. Okay, my turn. I have a room upstairs. I'd like you to come with me and we can continue our visit. We both laughed, finished our drinks, and headed to my room. We walked into the room, and when I turned around after closing the door, Judy kissed me. Judy, I want to be honest with you. I may not be the best lover. I haven't slept with anyone since I was married to Mary. Just be yourself. That's the person I feel attached to, Judy replied. The next morning, we woke up and got dressed. We went down to the restaurant and had a light breakfast. It was time to take Judy home. I knew I would miss her and told her I wanted to see her again. She kissed me goodbye and gave me a piece of paper with her phone number. Call me soon. I want to see you again. I had a wonderful time. I started calling her every Friday, making plans for Saturday or Sunday. Judy and I have been dating for over 2 months now, and we spend almost every weekend together. I usually don't stay overnight as I can be at her house within an hour and a half. We went to plays, sports games, and even took Darcy and her friend with us. I was learning a lot about the Pittsburgh area. I wanted a more permanent relationship with Judy, but we were still discussing it. After all, my business was in Ohio, and I lived in Ohio. Judy worked in Pennsylvania, and Darcy attended college there. The problem was that when I wasn't with her, I really missed her. We even started talking sometimes during the week. The problem was that after I heard her voice, I wanted to be with her even more. For a 51-year-old man, I must admit I was quite keen. I told my daughters about Judy, and they were happy for me. I asked about their mother, and they said she was dating someone but never talked much about it. My daughter Janet told me the bad news. Her husband Paul is laid off. They are making large staff cuts at their plant. I had a long talk with Paul and asked him what he thought about my tool business. I'd love to do something like that. Be my own boss, set my own hours, spend more time with Janet and the baby. I have an offer for you, Paul. Discuss it with Janet and get back to me. I'll sell you my Ohio territory, but you'll have to buy a truck. I'm thinking about buying the Pittsburgh territory, and that would be too much for one person. Paul's face lit up with joy. I told him that I would help them financially at first. The next day, I received a call from Janet. Dad, is this true? Will you help Paul start a business? Yes, but there are a few conditions that you both will need to agree to. I'll come see you on Friday and explain everything. Don't tell anyone until we talk. I have to negotiate the purchase of the Pittsburgh territory first, and you and Paul will need to make some decisions. Thank you, Dad. I love you so much. Tears welled up in my eyes. I spoke with the company about selling my property in Ohio to my daughter and son-in-law. A good friend of mine, Joe Grassel, was getting ready to retire and wanted to sell his territory, which included Pittsburgh and some surrounding areas. He also said that he was ready to sell his truck because he no longer needed it. On Friday, I went to see Janet and Paul. I explained to them that I had agreed to purchase the Pittsburgh territory from Joe and would sell them my territory in eastern Ohio. I knew they didn't have much money, so I offered to co-sign the loan for Joe's truck. This is what we do for our family, and I love my daughters. They could pay me for the territory in monthly payments at an agreed amount. I told them that this would be their joint business. I spoke with the company and they had no problem with my proposal. When Janet was younger, she always helped me with paperwork in the evening. I needed to call in orders and update inventory. She was a great help until she got married 3 years ago. I knew she and Paul would make a great team. I often thought how nice it would be if Mary helped me, but she preferred to work on her own. That was probably part of the reason we separated. Paul and Janet were excited. I told Paul that I would be running the Pittsburgh area starting next month. If he wanted to ride with me for the rest of this month, I would help him get comfortable in the area and explain what is expected of him. I would also introduce him to his clients. I agreed to pay him $400 a week during his training. His income will be at least 3 times more when he starts working on his own. We went to the company office and signed all the papers for the following Monday. He met with Joe and they agreed on the price of the truck. He will get it on the last day of the month. A month went by, and Janet and Paul started their own business. I was glad I could help them. I started my new route in the Pittsburgh area. I often stopped by the East Side Grill for breakfast to see Judy. I needed to move closer to Pittsburgh because the long commute every day was costing too much in gas. Judy helped me find a nice 2-bedroom apartment. It was furnished, but I didn't need much. I was away most of the time anyway. The following weekend, I loaded up my truck with my belongings and moved to my new apartment. When I arrived, Judy had already put things away and was helping me unload the rest of my stuff. That night, we went out to dinner and then came back to settle into my apartment. I couldn't believe how much I loved her. There was nothing I wouldn't do for her. If there is such a thing as a soulmate, then Judy was mine. We never fought or raised our voices at each other. If we had disagreements, we agreed that it was okay to have different opinions. If she wanted her way, she had a charming way of getting it. I knew I was in love with her, and I was pretty sure she felt the same about me. When either of us said, "I love you," we meant it. We started seeing each other every few days. It took me a while to get used to my new route, and I had to work a lot of extra hours getting to know new clients. One day I stopped by Judy's house and saw that she was upset. She couldn't hide it from me. "What happened, Judy?" "Carl showed up at work today and asked me to go with him to Youngstown, Ohio for the weekend." I was shocked and asked him, "Why would I want to go anywhere with you?" He replied, "Did you mind going on a cruise with me?" He said it loud enough for everyone to hear. I was embarrassed and told him to go away. "He said something else, didn't he?" I asked. "Yes, he said he heard that I was seeing an old wimp. I told him at least you knew how to make love. Then I loudly said that on the cruise he was always so drunk he couldn't do anything." "It's okay, honey, I'll talk to him. I'll let him know that if he bothers you again, he won't like it." "No, John, he's not worth it. He called me a name and the restaurant owner kicked him out and told him not to come back. Please, let's just forget about him. If he ever bothers me again, I'll tell you, I promise." I was very angry. I wanted to get back at him in any way. First, he helped ruin my marriage, and now he's bothering my girlfriend. I wasn't going to let him get away with it. I mentioned to Judy that maybe we could go to the Sheraton Inn again on Saturday and have our second first date there. She smiled at me and said she would love it. I knew deep down that I had to do something about Carl. I called his office on Friday and learned that he was at a conference in Youngstown. I pretended I needed to meet him there, and the secretary gave me his number without any trouble. Hotel and room number. I worked my route until about 5:30. I made sure my neighbors saw me before I got into my pickup truck and headed to Youngstown. I knew what I was about to do was wrong, but I was protecting my girlfriend. Carl made a big mistake when he contacted her. He wouldn't get away without consequences. He was staying at a cheap motel. He probably saved money from his daily allowance. I found the motel and saw a car with Pennsylvania plates in front of his room. The room was dark, so I assumed he wasn't there. The motel was next to a bar. There were a lot of cars and motorcycles there, so I parked in their lot so I could see his room. I went out and put on a baseball cap and sunglasses. I entered the bar and saw that it was full of people. I noticed Carl talking to the waitress. I quickly left the bar before anyone noticed me. I decided to drive a little further down the road. I needed gas, so I filled up the tank with cash. I didn't want to leave any receipts or card payments. I hadn't eaten, so I stopped at a fast food place and got myself a sandwich and a drink. About half an hour later, I returned and checked to see if Carl had returned to the motel. I stopped a little further away and took my big hunting knife. I wiped it down and put on gloves. Then I headed to the motel. I was determined to scare him when he opened the door. When I approached the motel, I couldn't believe my eyes. There were 3 patrol cars with their lights flashing. Traffic was difficult. Everyone wanted to know what was happening. We had to slow down to let the ambulance pass. As I drove past Carl's room, I saw Mary's car next to his and knew she was there. Mary stood in front of the door and cried. The doctors carried a body onto a stretcher. What happened? I got out of the traffic and drove home. Someone beat me to it and hurt Carl. What was Mary doing there? Was she the friend Janet had mentioned? I was terrified as I drove down the highway. When I drove through another city, I threw my gloves, baseball cap, and fast food packaging into the trash. I didn't want to leave anything in the car that could connect me to that place. I felt a little better. I've watched enough crime shows on TV to know that I've got the basics covered. Funny, I didn't do anything I planned, but someone beat me to it. When I got back to town, I went to one of the bars I visited occasionally, sat down, and had a few drinks with people I knew. While I was sitting there, Janet called. She said she and Paul were very excited about their business. Sure, here is the simplified version of the provided text. They felt they had become closer to each other. We talked a bit, and she asked how to send me money. I gave her my new address and said I would just send a check. I asked about her sister, and she said she was doing great in college. Susan was in her 3rd year studying to become a nurse. She called me about twice a month, usually when she needed money. It didn't bother me. They were my daughters. I asked Janet how she and her mother were doing, and she said she saw her every few days. Her mom was dating someone, but never really talked about it. She also said her mom was going out with an old friend for the weekend. Now I knew that this friend was Carl. After talking with Janet, I called Judy. I asked her if she wanted to spend the evening with me. She said that Darcy had gone to see friends and she would be glad to see me. I left the bar and went to Judy's. She had just returned from aerobics, which she does twice a week. I wanted to make sure our plans for tomorrow were set. I'll pick you up at 5. Don't forget your swimsuit. I want to use the jacuzzi and maybe the pool. Don't worry. I'll be ready and waiting. John, in case I haven't told you recently, I really love you. I love you too, Judy. More than I've ever loved anyone. And I meant it. I kissed her, and we sat there hugging. I don't know what we watched. I was there for about half an hour when my cell phone rang. I looked at my watch. It was 10:30. Who's calling me at this late hour? I asked. The phone screen showed it was the Youngstown Police Department. I answered, and it was Mary's voice. John, I'm at the Youngstown Police Station. Something bad happened. I pretended to be surprised. Judy looked at me. Are the girls okay? What happened? Why are you calling so late from Youngstown? John, Carl Crow was killed this evening, Mary said in an upset voice. Who is Carl Crow? I asked. I looked at Judy and she reminded me it was Carl from the cruise. I pretended I didn't know his last name. So why are you calling me? I never loved this man, and of course I did not kill him. I didn't want to show sympathy for him. Mary knew I didn't love him. By the way, what does this have to do with you? The police want to talk to you, so I called. I'll give the phone to the officer. She didn't answer my questions about why she was there, but of course I understood that she was his companion. I turned to Judy and repeated what I had been told. Carl Crow had been killed in Youngstown. She looked a little shocked. A police officer answered the phone. I told him I was with my girlfriend and put the phone on speaker so I wouldn't have to repeat everything twice. Mr. Hubble, I'm Detective Anderson of the Youngstown Police Department. Is your girlfriend Judy Wentz? Yes, it's me, Judy replied. We need to talk to both of you as soon as possible about your whereabouts this evening. Can you go to the Pittsburgh station, or should I send an officer to where you are? I don't understand. You're saying Carl Crow was killed, and you think we have something to do with it? I understand he was killed in Youngstown and we're in Pittsburgh. Are we the suspects? Mr. Bastian Hubble, at this moment, everyone who knew Carl Crowe is a suspect. The sooner we get your testimony, the sooner we can eliminate you as a suspect. So since you are together now, can you go to the station? You will be there waiting for the detective. Can't it wait until morning? It's almost 11 o'clock. This is a murder investigation, Mr. Toby Hubble. The sooner we talk to you, the sooner we can eliminate you as a suspect. I looked at Judy, and she thought we should go and sort this out. I told the detective that we would be at the Pittsburgh station within half an hour. Judy looked at me intently. I swear she could almost read my mind. You didn't kill him, John. No. Why are you even asking me this? Because I know you, John. And I know you've been wanting to get back at him since the cruise. I can see something is bothering you. I'm just surprised that Mary was probably with him. I even thought maybe she was involved somehow. I've just got a lot on my mind right now. I understand, John. I'm here for you, Judy said as we prepared to go to the police station. She left a note for Darcy so she wouldn't worry if she got home before her mother. They had a great mother-daughter relationship. When we arrived at the station, Detective Allen asked if we were John Hubble and Judy Wentz. We answered yes, and he thanked us for coming. He said that he and the other detective would speak to us separately for obvious reasons. I told Judy I'd see her later and went with the detective. I knew enough from crime shows to know I was in an interrogation room. I was offered coffee, which I accepted, and I brought my magazine with me. I assumed it might be needed. I spoke first. Sir, I would like to ask a few questions. Mr. Hubble, I will try to answer all your questions after you answer mine. Tell me how you knew Carl Crowe. I explained to the detective about our cruise and how it had helped destroy my marriage. You could say you weren't very fond of Mr. Crowe. When was the last time you saw or talked to him? The last time I saw him was when he entered a party on a cruise with Mary, my ex-wife. I haven't seen or spoken to him since... Where have you been all day? Today and this evening? Am I a suspect? Do you think I killed Carl? I was a little loud. Calm down, mister. Hubble. Everyone is a suspect at this point. We are just doing our job. Since you are divorced from your ex-wife and she was also at the crime scene, it is only natural that we would want to talk to you. Believe me, we are talking to everyone until we figure this out. So, where were you today? I gave him my log with all the stops for the day. He asked if he could copy it later, and I agreed. Where were you after 6:30? He asked. I was at home finishing my paperwork, which takes an hour or two every evening. After that, I went to the bar and had a couple of beers with my friends, I replied. He asked for names, and I gave them to him, and also mentioned that I spoke to my neighbors when I got home. What time did you go to the bar? He asked. I'm not sure, maybe 7:30 or after 8. My daughter called me while I was there, so she might know the time. After that, I went to Judy's, and we watched TV until Mary called. Then, we went there, I answered. The detective said he would be back in a few minutes to make a copy of my magazine. I sat and drank my coffee, feeling nervous even though I did nothing wrong. He returned 20 minutes later. Mr. Hubble, he said, Carl told her he was going to Youngstown and asked her to go with him. Why didn't you mention that? You didn't ask me, I replied. Judy was angry and said Carl asked her to go to a conference in Youngstown, but she told him she never wanted to see him again. They argued and he called her a name. The restaurant owner, Henry, kicked him out. Didn't she tell you that? Actually, she did, he said. She also suggested I talk to him, but she asked me to leave it as is, so I did. Do you want to test my hands for gunpowder residue like on TV? That will prove I didn't fire a gun, I suggested. The detective chuckled. What's funny? Isn't that proof? I asked. It is, but it won't help here. Carl Crowe was stabbed to death, he replied. Sorry, I didn't know, I said. Mr. Bridges, Hubble, I'll check your alibis. You are a suspect until we find the killer. Carl stole your wife, ruined your marriage, and tried to have an affair with your girlfriend. Just telling it like it is. We can't detain you now, but we might call you again, he explained. How is my ex-wife involved? I asked. My daughter said she was gone for the weekend. She didn't know with whom. Yes, she came to meet Carl. He called her on Thursday and asked her to spend the weekend with him. When she arrived, she knocked. but there was no answer. She opened the door and found Carl dead. She called 911 and the police came right away. That's all I can tell you for now. Thank you for cooperating. Stay in touch, he said. I walked out to the waiting room where Judy was waiting. I hugged her tightly and we went home. On the way, we talked about the questions they asked us. Her questions were similar to mine. She said she was being honest. Telling the truth is easier than remembering a lie, she said. She was right. It was almost 1 a.m. when we got back to her house. I asked if our date the next night was still on, and she said, "I'm not going to let a dead guy ruin an evening with the man I love." We kissed, and I went home. I didn't sleep well, but that was expected. The next day, no one called. I was surprised. I went shopping, bought a new suit, and then an engagement ring for Judy. I picked her up, and she was ready on time. She looked beautiful. I opened my truck door for her, and she climbed in, smiling. She said everyone at work was talking about Carl's murder. Everyone had an opinion. Judy told them she knew Carl, but didn't say much else. She never mentioned me because no one knew how or when we met. We arrived at the Sheraton, checked in, and took our suitcases to the room. We decided to go to the bar for a drink while we waited for our dinner table. We talked more about the case. I told her I didn't know Mary was dating Carl. The detective said Mary claimed they were just friends and met about once a month. We had a wonderful dinner. Afterward, I ordered us a drink. When it arrived, I took out the ring in a small box. Judy was surprised. "Judy, I know we haven't been together long, but I love you very much. Will you marry me?" I asked. Judy had tears in her eyes but didn't answer. I just sat there, waiting. "John, I love you more than any man I've ever loved, but I need to tell you a story. You never asked about Darcy's father or why I never married. Darcy's dad and I were together for 4 years. When I got pregnant, he asked if it was his baby and wanted me to get rid of it. I was stunned. We broke up, and I never saw him again. My parents were mad I didn't make him take a paternity test, but I didn't want him in our lives. My parents understood. Darcy had my father, uncles, and brothers as father figures. My uncle invited us to stay with him. He was a truck driver, home 3 or 4 nights a week. I cleaned and cooked for him. I got a job at a restaurant, and my mother took care of Darcy. She was my life and the reason I never married," Judy explained. "I didn't want some strange man telling Darcy what to do. I know this may seem odd, but this is how I felt. My uncle died of a heart attack 2 years ago, and in his will, he left his house and property to me. I dated like I told you, but I never met that special person until I met you. Then marry me. We make a great couple," I replied to John. "The problem is that I believe in honesty. Lack of communication is the leading cause of divorce. Couples don't talk and don't tell when something is wrong. It can destroy a marriage. John, I love you with all my heart, but I know that you are hiding something from me. I can feel it. How can I marry you if you can't trust me, like I can trust you?" I knew we were soulmates, and she could almost read my mind. "Okay, Judy, I'll tell you what's bothering me. First of all, I want you to know that I didn't kill Carl. I planned it, but someone beat me to it. That night when you were sad and said that Carl called you a bad name, it bothered me that I let such a jerk get away with it. I felt I had to protect you at all costs. I didn't care about the consequences, although I hoped I had considered all possible options. I finished my route early and drove to Youngstown to kill Carl. I called his office on Friday and told the secretary that I should meet him. She gave me the name of the hotel and his room number. I went there, but his room was dark. I decided to go to the bar next to the motel, but it was full of bikers, and I saw Carl talking to the waitress. I quickly left and drove further down the road to get gas and fast food. I was gone for about half an hour, and when I returned to the motel, I saw police cars and Mary's car in front of Carl's door. Mary was standing on the sidewalk crying, talking to the police. I put away the hunting knife and drove home as quickly as possible. I stopped at the bar like I planned after the murder. I thought about you, and that's why I stopped by. I just couldn't let Carl hurt the girl I love and get away with it. That's it. That's my secret. I couldn't tell the police because they don't know who killed Carl, and I'm still their suspect. They might think that I had time to go there, kill Carl, and come back. I swear I didn't do it, but only because someone beat me to it." Judy had tears in her eyes. She took the ring, handed it to me, and extended her left hand. "Yes, John, I will marry you." I put the ring on her finger and we kissed. Then we went to our room. We slept late the next day. We then headed to her house to inform Darcy of our upcoming wedding plans. Darcy was very happy for us. She said her mom seemed much happier since we started dating. She asked her mother if she could be a bridesmaid and help organize the wedding. I knew that Darcy's confession meant a lot to Judy. We decided to get married in 2 months. We chose a Saturday, and I suggested we have the wedding at the Sheraton, which we loved. So everyone who comes from other cities will be able to stay there. Plans were started. Darcy said she only wanted invitation lists from me. She and her mother would take care of the rest. I knew money would be an issue, so I pulled Judy aside and told her I had enough saved to pay for the wedding. She smiled at me and said that soon I would meet her whole family. Her parents were alive, and I would have to argue with her father about who would pay for the wedding. Her father had said years ago that he had saved money for either college or Judy's wedding, whichever came first. Judy hadn't gone to college and hadn't gotten married yet. I started calling my family on Sunday. Everyone was delighted. Both my daughters were happy for me. They said the police contacted them about Carl's murder. They needed to know their whereabouts. Now they knew who their mother was with on the cruise. I told them that I was not involved and that I had happier things to think about. I told them the wedding date and told them they would receive an invitation. I called my brother and sister who lived in Steubenville. My mom and dad were still alive and promised that they would come to the wedding. It's funny, but Judy would be meeting my family for the first time and I would be meeting hers. I was close to my siblings, but I didn't see them often. On Monday, I returned to work. All my clients noticed that I looked happy. I told them I was going to get married. I knew I couldn't be happier. I stopped by Judy's after work. She told me that Pia came to see her. She told her that the police came to her to ask questions about her whereabouts on the night of Carl's murder. Pia was working at the bar that night and didn't know anything about the murder until Sunday. The police wanted to know about Zach. Pia couldn't say much. He had biker friends, but she didn't know them. She remembered that at the trial, Zach said that he intended to take revenge on Carl, but did not have time. The police thought that perhaps his friends from the biker club had finished the job. I remembered that there were a lot of bikers in the bar, but I couldn't tell the police. I shouldn't have been there. I assumed they would figure it out themselves. We continued to prepare for the wedding, and everything was going well. Over the weekend, Judy introduced me to her parents. They turned out to be wonderful people. Her father welcomed me into the family and said he was happy for us. He also said that he had discussed it with Judy and that he would pay for the wedding. That's what fathers do. He told me I knew he was right and didn't argue with him. A few days later, I was at a restaurant talking to Judy when the cops came. Judy said many of the officers frequent the restaurant and are her friends. She introduced me to them, and I asked if there was any news on the Carl murder case. They said, "We have suspects, but not enough evidence to charge anyone. We're trying to find out if someone followed Carl from the bar to his room." I don't know if you know, but there were a lot of bikers in the bar. We don't know if they were friends with Zach. Detectives will talk to Zach in jail this week, but they don't expect much. Thank you, officer. I hope I'm removed from the list of suspects soon. Since you're Judy's friend, I'll tell you that your alibi checks out. I can't say more. They went to their table, and another waitress took their order. I felt a little better. I finished my breakfast and went to work. Judy and Darcy were busy preparing for the wedding every evening after work. I tried not to disturb them because they didn't need my advice. I took Judy to Steubenville to meet my parents. They loved her right away. We talked for a while and then went out to dinner. They said they would come to the wedding and stay the night. They were getting too old to drive long distances in the dark. We promised to book a room for them. There was 1 week left before the wedding. I would be a married man again. Judy and I decided I would move into her house. She and Darcy were fine with that. Darcy was finishing her second year of college, studying accounting. One evening, I asked Darcy to talk. She was surprised, as was Judy. We sat in the living room. "Darcy, what are your plans after you graduate?" "Find a job and start working, I think." "Why? Do you know someone who could hire me?" She knew I talked to businessmen every day. "Actually, I do. Me. Let me explain. I use my daughter and son-in-law as an example. Paul does most of the driving and delivering orders. Janet does the paperwork, keeps records, and calls customers. She handles the books. I do it all myself now and have for many years. It takes up hours each day and takes time away from your mother. I was wondering if you would like to become my secretary and maybe a salesperson." Are you serious, John? Judy asked. Yes, if she wants to start after the wedding, I'm all for it. It will be part-time until she finishes school. I checked my records and I can pay her $300 a week at first. Of course, I'll show her what to do. We can call this a trial period. If she wants to continue after that, we'll see how much we can pay her and make a formal agreement. Darcy really liked this idea. She could go to school during the day and I would show her the paperwork in the evening. I told her she could leave any time if she wanted. This would be a great solution for me. Darcy would have a job and could work from home if she wanted. She would get a chance to see if she liked the work. For me, this meant getting rid of all the paperwork and freeing up time for Judy. I think that was part of the problem in my marriage to Mary. Even though she didn't want to work with me, everything was going great for Janet and Paul. The wedding was wonderful. I met all of Judy and Darcy's relatives. They were very happy for us. Many wondered why Judy never married. That will remain our secret. My family thought Judy was the best thing that ever happened to me. I had to agree. Maybe our more mature and wiser selves played a role. We decided to visit our relatives more often. We became one big, happy family. Janet and Susan told me they really liked Judy. She makes me happy, and I deserve to be happy. We didn't talk much about their mother. They said she goes to work and is still seeing someone. She probably couldn't find another weak-willed person like me to fulfill her every whim. Not the nicest thing to say on your wedding day. But as Judy told me, always be honest. After the wedding reception, some relatives stayed at the hotel while others went home. Everyone said they had a great time. Judy and I went to our room and made love. The next morning, we had breakfast with relatives who stayed the night. I paid the bill. Judy's father just smiled at me. He knew what it meant to have a family. We decided not to go on our honeymoon until our first anniversary. I was still growing my business and needed to find a replacement for over a week. It's been a year since we got married and life is wonderful. Darcy has completed her studies and now works full-time in our business. Judy still works as a waitress, a job she truly loves. Darcy turned out to be great for business. She found ways to make it simpler and more efficient. She talks to Janet often and they exchange ideas. Darcy offered to go on the route with me one day a week. This way, she could get to know our clients. She has a personality like her mother and is good with people. When we visited businesses, she always came back with more orders. Now I pay her a higher salary and 5% of the extra sales she makes. Every week she spends one day on the route with me and has learned my entire route. When Judy and I got ready for our one-year honeymoon, Darcy said she would take over the route. Everything turned out great. Judy and I went on a week-long cruise to Cancun. One thing we decided in advance was no nudist beaches, but we could be naked in our cabin. As for Carl's murder, the case is still not closed. The police spoke to Zach and he just laughed when they asked if he had anything to do with it. Let's just say I always get my revenge. You'll never know who did it, he laughed. They didn't know whether to believe him. In prison, this added to his respect. The police didn't have enough evidence to charge anyone. My daughters are living well. I told Janet and Paul how their business was doing. Susan was set to graduate this year as a nurse. She was dating a young intern and they would probably get married soon. As for Mary, she keeps to herself. The girls talk to her, but I haven't seen her since Carl died. Even then, she didn't know I was there. Looking back, I think the cruise with Mary will always be a romantic memory. Thanks for listening to One Infidelity Hit. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop us a like.